Hi, Remi. How are you?
Hello,
Remi?
I'm fine. What
Hi.
about you?
Hey, we are fine. First of all, thank you for stay with us today to asking about to answer about provider or Riverpod. Some question about your package. We have some question about this package that the community sent us. For example, Marcos Sevilla, I think, have some question about Riverpool.
Hi, Remy. Basically, the question is, what does Rivercode need to become the actual successor of provider?
That's a tough question. I would say it's mostly dependent on whether the community accepts Riverpod. Because some people, I had a recent discussion on Twitter about this, about potentially merging them. And some people expressed that they use provider because it's very similar to how you would use inherited widgets in Flutter, whereas Riverpod is quite different, I would say. So there would be some clash here. But yeah, I mean, if there is not really a need for Riverpod to become the official provider. I mean, it could be separate forever. I mean, if people migrate to using Riverpod and it's enough for them, I mean, I don't see any reason to change the name to provider, first of all.
Okay, thanks. I have another question. It's just a comment I saw right now. Basically, what do you think about block and Flutter block? I mean, like, I've seen your tweets about having like streams as state management solution. So basically, what is different between using a stream, or why don't you like to use streams as state management?
First of all, depending on what you define by block, I would say that it's not quite streams. Like if you're using Flutter block from Felix, as opposed to what Google published during the Google I/O, which is a slightly different approach. The approach that's taken by Felix, in my opinion, I wouldn't quite call it using streams. It's more like a superset of streams that adds some extra functionality on the top of it. So the rules are slightly different from what I expressed in my tweet. My main issue with streams is more about error start itself and the Google I/O, as the approach announced during the Google I/O with the official block, you could call it, where like there are so many. I mean, one of my issues with streams is that if you're using bare streams without anything on top of it, there are so many different mistakes you could have in your application. Like for example, if you're just using basic stream in Dart, you could have a bug where when you navigate from one page to like you have a list of to-dos, you open the dates page to add a to-do list, to add an item, and you go back. Depending on your navigation flow, you could somehow, when you go back to the page, end up having a circular progress indicator that never completes because no event is further pushed on the stream. And that's where what Felix does with streams kind of work around the issue. In my opinion, what it does is closer to value notifier. Like it's a stream with a current value that is readable synchronously, which is quite different from what streams would do normally. Like in typical streams, you're not able to read streams synchronously. So that's one of the big difference. Yeah, in my opinion, in Flutter, it doesn't make streams don't really make sense in the sense that since we're not able to read the value synchronously, whereas widgets are more very synchronously focused. Like whenever you use Future Builder or whatever, they convert asynchronous things into synchronous things, like with async snapshot from Future Builder. So we want to manipulate states synchronously. But then in that case, the approach taken by Felix does that in a way. So I don't really have any issue with what Felix does with Flutter block. It doesn't. My complaint about stream doesn't really fit here.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's basically all my questions. I think the chat has a lot of other questions, so that's
thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marco. Thanks, Marco. Thanks. And before I start with some question in the chat, I want to ask you, Remi, about your feeling with Flutter Engage or Flutter 2 announcement. So, for example, do you think that they was present desktop stable for Flutter, or is a surprise for you, or?
I mean, I kind of expected the announcement, most of the announcements of the Flutter engagement, besides the version 2.0. This one was surprise considering doesn't really do anything special besides making a major version bump. But yeah, Flutter Desktop is definitely interesting, and Web 2. I mean, I'm definitely interested in seeing how Flutter will evolve to support most platforms. I'm also wondering, Fuchsia at some point we may get there. We don't know when it would come, but that will also likely be a good use case for Flutter.
Yes. For example, the collaboration with Toyota or Canonical, what do you think about these big companies that will use Flutter for their products? Like, for example, in Canonical, the installer, and the Toyota, the UI of their cars is very important part in these days of one car. So, what do you think about this?
I mean, when you think about it, it's not really the first car company that's working with Flutter. If I remember correctly, BMW worked with Flutter too. I may be wrong, but because I think Felix worked with BMW for some time. So I think that it's definitely use Flutter. But yes, that's an interesting thing. The more we have big companies using Flutter, the better for the community. So it will drive the community to move forward, and it also will help smaller companies adopt Flutter, because many companies are kind of like afraid of using Flutter because we don't have that many big companies using it. So yeah, the more the merrier.
Okay. And I think we will start with a question in the chat. The first is Elian, so Elian can ask directly if he can. Elian, are you here?
Can you listen to me?
Yes.
Well, first of all, it's an honor to have you here. I just had some questions. I've been experimenting a lot with Riverpod. So first of all, I was wondering if Riverpod, you said that Riverpod is ready for production applications.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely ready. There are still a few breaking changes I will likely do in March, but they're very minor. There are some issues on GitHub about that explains them in detail, so you can look at it if you want to. But other than that, yeah, it's in a stable state for sure.
Okay, thanks. I just had two more questions really fast. The other one, just to keep in the same line, I usually use Riverpod. Well, that one. What architecture do you use for your applications? If you do use any design pattern or whatever.
I mean, would saying that I use Riverpod in my application answers the question, or are you expecting something else?
It kind of answered, but I was wondering, just like let's say lately, a big topic that has been touched in Latin America is about Flutter architecture. So let's say the separation between data, domain, and the data sources and all those stuff. If you do make a separation of layers, let's say of your data and domain, comparing your business logic in Riverpod, or you usually mix everything, or what kind of separation do you make there?
I'm not really sure what's the proper term for the architecture I use, to be honest. But the way I typically architecture things is splitting things by responsibility in a way that I'm kind of like, it's close to a split by entity, as in you would have a to-do controller, you would have a user controller, things like this. Instead of the alternative would be potentially home controller, settings controller, to-do list controller, I don't know. Whereas here it's very focused on the entity. Yeah, I also try to push this split all the way, as in it's also applied to the folder architecture too. I do the same split with the folders. So I have a folder directly for the. I don't split things in like models, views, and whatever. I do instead splits by, like, I have a folder for the home page, a folder for a folder more by like business logic instead of type, yeah, that's usually how I architecture things. There's probably a word for it, and I'm just not sure which one it is.
Yeah, well, thanks. And last but not least, I was experimenting with the testing. So usually, in my case, I also would like to have your opinion. What I do is I make kind of a separation by feature. So in there, I'll have a separation between views and business logic. So let's say in my logic, I have a state notifier, and I make just like an approach to the block pattern, let's say. So I will usually have my states in class that are freeze classes. So I'll be using the state notifier to propagate the state throughout my application and make the reaction using state notifier. But the question is, what will you say is the best way for testing the state notifier by itself? Because I was just getting with a kind of trouble. I find at the end, I discovered that there were two ways. I read the code you wrote, basically the test for the state notifier. So I saw that you could make a comparison using the stream, and let's say in my case, using the stream and comparing the list of states. But I also could save all the states in a list and then compare the list. So what will you say is the best? Is it better to compare the different states, in my case, using a stream or using a list?
I wouldn't recommend using the stream, because again, as you probably have heard before, I don't really like streams in general. The stream in state notifier is there more as a convenience in some situations, like for pull to refresh, for example. I find tests easier to read and to write when you're just asserting that the current state of the state notifier is what it should be, instead of using things like emits from streams. I find that emits and the similar methods tend to have there are a few scenarios where you're kind of losing your mind on why is this test not passing. Whereas here, when you're using when you're reading the state normally, it's just reading a property, so nothing is unexpected, I would say. if this state is incorrect, and then it's because you likely have a bug, not because the test you wrote is badly written. So yeah, just assert the state is correct directly without using streams.
Wow.
And if you're using things like, if your state notifier is using things like network requests, for your unit tests, what you could do is mock the HTTP service, or if you want to, you could extract some of the logic inside a repository class that you can then fake for your test. And then you would be able to, use Mockito, for example, to verify that the correct arguments were passed or whatever. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, and also thanks for your packages. I do like them a lot, and I'm using them every day. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lian. And we have some question in the chat about who does provider plan to evolve?
I am thinking about bringing some of the features from a repo to provider. Like potentially the ability to use watch inside the create function of a provider, such that when the provider obtains updates, the value created by the provider that obtain another provider will be recreated too. So some functionalities like this that would make composition for providers easier. I still need to sort out how we would combine asynchronous providers like future providers, stream providers, because we still lack the ability to await for the future to be completed. But yeah, that's one of the things I'm experimenting on. And then there is also, more concretely, there is, you may have heard about it if you saw me on Twitter. I'm working on a dev tool for provider to inspect the state of an application using provider, which will also be available if you're using Riverbot, by the way, and probably for Block too, since Block is using provider, at least at the moment. So yeah, there is that.
Oh, a lot of job, a lot of work. So thanks for your time, because you are a open source developer. You maintain a lot of Flutter package for free, I think. So yeah. Thank you for your time creating this package. And we have another question. The question is from Alejandro. So if you want to tell.
Hi, Remi. How do you see provider in the future? Do you think that Riverpod will replace provider, or what do you think about?
I would like Riverpod to take over for sure. I personally prefer Riverpod, but I'm also skeptical on if it will really take over, in the sense that, I mean, it's mostly dependent on whether the community accepts the new syntax. For now, it appears that most people are fine with it, but I know for sure that some people are against it. So we'll see. But personally, I mean, it doesn't really matter in the end, I would say. Like, use what you prefer, and I will maintain both anyway. So it's not like it changed anything.
Okay, thanks. And I have another question. What was your motivation to make the packages that you have made? So what motivates you to keep maintaining your things?
Mostly fun, to be honest. Like, often it's because there is some form of challenge or a common problem faced by the community. At least that's how Provider started, for example. You may know that I answered a few years ago, I answered a lot on StackOverflow to Flutter questions. And I noticed that some questions come up often, like especially with inherited widgets. We had so many questions about inherited widgets, especially before provider. And so, yeah, provider, at least the first few versions of provider were an attempt to simplify inherited widgets. And then, over time, I improved. Then it evolved in simplifying, solving the problems that provider applications face, and then it goes further and further. And then Repot came because of this, because it tries to solve some problems that provider has. Freeze too, it tries to solve some problems with immutable architectures, union types, things like this that are missing in Dart at the moment. So yeah, it's usually trying to solve a problem and experimenting. I tend to, like, you may see that I have like a few packages, but if you saw how many experiments I made, I probably have at least 20 or 30 experiments that are not published because I don't think they are production ready, but I'm just trying different things.
Cool. Great. That's all. Thanks for your answers. And that's all.
Thank you, Alex. I have we have another question about provider from Jorge. So, if you want to tell to Remi directly.
Beforehand, thank you, Remi, for your work with provider. I've seen some tweets about the new navigation and routing system. My question is, are you working in a new navigation tool in this moment? Or do you have any plan to work in a new navigation tool for Flutter?
I have some experiments. I'm working on it, you could say, in the sense that I'm trying to find a solution to the problem, because we definitely have a problem here at the moment. I'm pretty sure most people would agree that Navigator 2 is not ideal at the moment. So yeah, I'm definitely trying to find a solution for it. The issue I have at the moment is the amount of work to get something reasonable, at least to my taste, is huge for navigation, at least, because you have to re-implement a bunch of things like hero animations, unlinked back buttons, material transition, Cupertino transition, because depending on the approach taken, if you're too different from Navigator, you have to basically start from scratch again. So there is a lot of work involved, which is my issue at the moment, which is why I haven't published something yet, because it's just too much work. But yeah, it's still in the back of my mind. I'll likely publish something at some point because of Riverpod and because it's a topic related to state management in general. Like, for example, one of the things I would like to do as part of the navigation flow, which at the moment I don't think any routing system handles, is being able to delay for a few frames showing the new page until the state of the new page is loaded, is fully loaded. So, for example, you try to push a new page, but the new page has some content inside that is fetched from an API. We may want to just delay showing the new page for a few seconds and instead showing the previous page, because there is no point in showing a spinner to the user, because the spinner is just, nothing very interesting. But doing that out of the box with the current routing systems is quite tricky. There is no easy way to show the previous page while the new page is loading. So yeah, that's one of the things I would like to solve too.
Thank you for your answer, Remi. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge, for your question. It's all. So thanks another time for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for making this event. I'm pretty sure it would be helpful for many people to see the different. This kind of format, I think, is interesting, and I wonder if maybe consider making one in English. I'm sure it would be appreciated.
Thanks, Remi. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.